Hello and welcome to the Successful Thinking Podcast, where impossible becomes possible. It's time to claim your successful mindset and live your dreams. With your host, Master Certified Life and Success Coach, Dr. Jolene Church.
Welcome back, successful thinkers, to this week's episode of the Successful Thinking Podcast. I'm Dr. Jolene Church, and I am here to explore with you your inner power to help you break down barriers in your own mind and turn what you once thought was impossible into possible. Today, we're diving into a topic that resonates very deeply with so many of us in today's work landscape. So the topic: unleashing bold moves and the hidden barriers to your next big leap. Today, I posed a question on LinkedIn to my community, and I'd like to pose this question to all of you right now. What would you do if you were brave? Now, think about that question. What would you do if you were brave? Brave enough to ask for that promotion, talk to that person that you want to get to know, put yourself first, maybe chase your dreams, or to finally start that podcast that you wanted, or that side hustle. And this last one is a really big one because the desire to break free from the conventional 9-to-5 grind and then venture into a world of self-employment or maybe even 1099 work can be exciting and scary all at the same time. I've done it. Many of you have done it. Many of you desire to do that. So on today's episode, I have a wonderful treat for you as I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Heidi. She's bravely made this shift, and we're going to explore her journey, the barriers that she faced, and the fears and limiting beliefs that she overcame, and then how she's thriving in her new career path. So whenever you're contemplating something like a side hustle or dreaming of quitting your 9-to-5 just to pursue this big, wild, crazy entrepreneurial dream, this conversation's for you. If this is something that has just been on that list and it's really been nagging at you, let's go after this. So let's jump into an exploration of this journey, because this is a bravery and transformation journey that everyone needs to hear. So let me start by introducing Heidi. Heidi Lumpkin left her corporate life behind in 2016, and she founded Fridays Open and is a professional coach and a business consultant. She created the Confidence at Work Challenge, and she's the director of marketing at the Coach Certification Institute. And I am very blessed to call this amazing woman a friend. So welcome, Heidi.
Well, thank you, Jolene. And right back at you. I am blessed by you as well every day.
Well, thank you so much. So I really want to just kind of dive right in and get a little bit of background on this, what your path looked like, all of that. So share with us what motivated you to make a transition from a 9-to-5 job to working independently.
Right, I'm happy to share that. It all started back in 2010. I was encouraged by one of my colleagues at the time to get a coaching certification. And I didn't know what coaching was. It was still relatively new, but she had gotten her certification through the company, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to give this a shot. And at the time, I had managed a national team. We were in sales training and development. This was a big company. It was a Japanese-based global Fortune 500. And I had been guiding a team at the time using traditional management and leadership principles, and things were good. I didn't know what I didn't know. But when I went to this certification program for coaching, it absolutely blew me away. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but it had such an impact. Because you know how, like, when you meet someone and you don't know at the time how they're going to change the course of your life. That was me dating my coaching certification. Little did I know at that time that it would change everything for me. But you had asked what really prompted the move.
Yeah.
I didn't plan to make a bold move. I thought
Mhm.
I would ride the corporate wave into retirement, but you fast forward to 2016, and like many people, I'd escalated my career to a level that I thought I wanted and I thought I was prepared for. But once I got there, there was this fundamental shift organizationally. I found myself getting up at 5:30 in the morning so I could conference with our vendors in India. And I was working until 5:30 in the evening and going to pick up my kid from daycare. And it was a grind. I was
Yeah.
miserable. I was in a constant state of stress. I had insomnia, anxiety, and it was like one of those things where you reach this pinnacle and you look out from the view and you don't like what you see. And I didn't like how I felt. And it was really disappointing, Jolene, because I had enjoyed my career so much up until that point, but coupled with the travel, something had to give, and I didn't want it to be myself or my sanity.
Yeah.
So I
So,
had started. Oh, go ahead.
well, and I'm hearing that many of these key factors was as you were weighing, what was valuable to you, all of a sudden that really kind of set you into motion to start considering, hey, there's got to be something better than this. Is that right?
It's absolutely right, and it's interesting you say that because I hadn't really thought of it that way. I always just think back on that time and how out of alignment I really was with what I did value, which I think is another way of saying what you just did. And luckily, I had started coaching teams internally after I got that certification. And it wasn't with any other intention other than to grow my skills and also to introduce other people to the power of coaching because it had made such an impact on me. I wanted to share that internally.
Yeah.
And so I did workshops. I started with my own team. I did a workshop on employee engagement that I designed. And I kind of just did it. I had a side hustle within my organization. And what ended up happening as a result of that is word got out because we were seeing employee engagement results from this workshop. Word spread, and other managers started asking me to conduct the workshop with their teams.
That's
And
cool.
so that was an interesting start and kind of unusual, um, in that I was able to use my side hustle at the time to get some practice and get some more experience under my belt, and also to help others experience the power of coaching as well.
What a cool way to build your skills, to really hone your craft, and then be able to go outside of your organization and market that by having that on the job practice. So let's talk about that really quick because a lot of people think, oh, if I'm going to get a coaching certification or gosh, anything. So anyone wants to just not do that 9 to 5 grind. They're not quite sure. Maybe they wanted to open a restaurant or do hair, whatever it is that they wanted to do, but they don't know how to make that transition. So let's talk about some different things that you did as you were making that transition. So here you had this on the job type of training, and this is definitely a strategy that I would recommend is honing your skills and really niching and understanding what you're really great at, what you have a passion for, so that when you go out to the market, you know exactly who you are and not trying to cater to absolutely everyone. So what did that look like for you? So here you are internally really honing that skill and craft. Then what was that point where you said, I quit, and then you take that scary leap and you're out there. You're not holding on to the branch anymore because you've let go of that W-2 paycheck. Now what? So what did that look like for you?
I would recommend to anyone who's considering this and making a bold move, or even just doing some research on it. You don't know yet, maybe if you're going to make the move or not, but you need more information in order to make a decision.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a side hustle. I like to look at it more like doing a pilot project. And the reason I like to look at it in those terms, and this is in hindsight what I did, is a project has a defined beginning and a defined end. And
Right.
it's not as scary, I think, as just starting up this side business. It puts a little less maybe pressure on yourself, and you can look at it as a project with a defined amount of time. And so what I did was my first pilot project was around coaching, that one that I just shared.
Yep.
The next one was to see if I could make money at it. Right.
Mm.
So it was something I loved. It was something I was good at, but would somebody else pay me? And so I used a pilot project outside of my 9 to 5 job. And honestly, I was getting paid in a way to explore the market. I put my
Yeah.
name out there to some friends and to colleagues, and I just wanted to see where it went. The results were good. They weren't earth-shattering, but they were good. I was putting out a signal, right, and looking for noise. Um, and so it also helped me while I was doing that pilot project. It helped me re-engage at work because I was more fulfilled in my life as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing about that fulfillment in life magnifies our feelings about our work.
Yeah.
And because of that, even though I felt better about some facets, it also put a magnifying glass of how out of alignment I really was. And so that's where I decided to take that pilot project and plan on making that leap.
Wow. Okay. Now, so what did that look like when you actually left in 2016? What did that look like? I mean, that had to have been really, really scary.
It was scary and it was exhilarating. And I had both of those emotions in tandem for a long time. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows on the other side, right? There's work, and I had to build that skill of resilience quite quickly. But sometimes I think when you make a big shift, the universe does conspire for your good. And I got hired relatively quickly with my first 1099 position, a contract position. Happened to be a leadership coach at a company that was on the verge of this meteoric rise in providing leadership coaching to high profile organizations.
Nice.
And that was my first contract role. And I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't had two things. And one was my coaching certification, and the other was my corporate experience. And so for me, I was introduced to a whole other world of creating my own schedule and diving into something and really chewing on it, if you will. It was so interesting. And that exhilaration stayed with me for a long time with that contract role.
Yet I'm sure there were challenges. So you have a 1099 gig. So for those of you listening who aren't quite sure what the heck we're talking about, as a full-time employee, a W-2 employee, you're an employee for the company. As a 1099 contractor, they don't take out taxes, so you get a 1099 at the end of the year saying that you did X amount of dollars worth of work for a specific role that you fulfilled, whatever you did, but you're not an employee of that organization. So with that, there does come some flexibility, but you are limited in your flexibility to the terms of your 1099 contract. Now, sometimes there may be an hourly 1099 where they might supply various clients. Other times you might be developing a product or service for them or delivering so many services for them. And so with this, Heidi, there had to have been some challenges that you had during this transition from a regular paycheck to a 1099. You talked a little bit about the kind of that shift in the scheduling and having that freedom. But what were some challenges also with that? And let's also dive into the financial uncertainty piece of this, because that early stage is usually pretty pivotal. What did that look like?
Yes, it is pivotal. It continues to be pivotal, honestly. It is a challenge with 1099 work, but I think now I'm so much more experienced with it that I can handle it better and differently than I did initially. But to take that leap from W-2 to a 1099, you have to be very practical about it. And I don't mean you have to be conservative, but it really helped me to get my financial house in order ahead of time. I had to make sure I had a certain amount of runway and being very realistic about that runway. And for me, it was 6 months to a year. And I wanted to have that runway to give myself the grace and take off some of the financial pressure because I didn't know where this was going.
Mm,
I knew where I wanted it to go, but it's not just as easy as hanging a signal. The phone
yeah.
starts ringing. That's just not how it works. And for most of us, it takes time to build a business, build a presence, and get the word out. And stress takes a toll on creativity too. So that's where I really wanted enough runway to make sure that I wasn't feeling that pressure. And that's what I love so much about doing a pilot project or two is the risk is limited, the time is limited, it's all upside, and you really are getting paid initially, so you have a much better idea of what you get into out of there. But in addition to what you were saying, Jolene, about what are some of those risks, what I ended up doing is in addition to the 1099 contract that I had, I was building my own business as well. So I
Right.
would have more than one income stream. And so that worked well. And then eventually I started adding more 1099 opportunities. I have now what I call a portfolio career, where
Right.
I do many different projects for different clients, as well as direct to client coaching on my own.
Yeah. And I love this term pilot project. I like looking at it this way. I think it really does, when we're talking about limiting beliefs, I think any way the story we can tell ourselves, right? If it's more appetizing, we are more likely to go with that and not be limited by any beliefs or fears that are holding us back. So what were, if any fears or limiting beliefs that might have held you back initially that you can think of, and if you had those, and how you overcame those?
Yes, my initial reaction to that is, of course, I did. Um, and I think it's all that common mind chatter that can happen to all of us. My initial fears were, what if this doesn't work? I had a fear of, and this one I've learned is very, very common, a fear of what will my former colleagues think of me?
Hmm.
Who am I to do this? And all those kinds of second guessing type of fears.
Mhm.
So something that really worked for me, it was actually a couple things. I mentioned building that resilience before, and part of building resilience is being able to bounce back from setbacks really quickly. Now
Yeah.
that's easier said than done, but when I found myself feeling this way, I would change my attention. I would look at the inflection point in my mind and I would change the talk. And sometimes it was even turning myself to affirmations that could really help. I mean, one that's so common is feel the fear and do it anyway. And that one was very, very helpful. But the other thing that I really focused on was the fact that I was taking a risk that others didn't. And to me, I was giving myself some kudos for that. Mark Zuckerberg says the biggest risk is not taking any risk. And people who feel that safety in a W-2 role, first of all, I don't think you're that safe. You feel like you are, but are you really? And we could talk a little bit more about that. But just kind of back to that resilience was I was embarking on something that I really felt I needed to do, and giving myself the time and the grace and the learning to be able to do it well. In all honesty, it didn't, where I am now is much farther than I thought it would be. And it's in a different spot than I thought it would be too. But isn't that the way it goes with careers and life?
Absolutely. It's funny, you talk about this learning kind of piece, and sometimes we have to give ourselves that space to be able to learn and grow and such. But I have a upcoming podcast that's on preparation or procrastination, and it's based on the atomic habits, not constraining ourselves too much to where we never take that leap. And like you said with Zuckerberg, I think it's really important because when we ask ourselves, what's holding me back, or what have I dreamed that I haven't dared to pursue, these types of limitations, sometimes we can get into oh, I don't know enough yet. I haven't prepared enough yet. when we're talking with prospective coaches and such for the Institute, some folks are like, well, who am I to coach others? I've, been in a 9 to 5. I'm not anyone who has any exceptional advice. And I tell them, look, a coach is really, they're not that advisor. When we get into business coaching, we start getting into something very different. And that's why we teach business coaching very different. But as a coach, as a life coach, as a transition coach, as a career coach, we're listening for those limiting beliefs. We're listening for what people are not saying as they're talking about wanting to pursue their goals, right? We're helping people get from point A to point B, from where they are now to the state that they want to be. So I'm sure that there was a time that you had doubt, just like many of our students have doubt. Can I even do this? Am I going to be able to learn these skills to be able to help guide clients to their own answers? So could you maybe share a moment when you doubted your decision and how you pushed through that doubt? I think that this is a really important thing, because as you were talking about Zuckerberg, that really stuck out in my mind, that sometimes we just have to keep going even when we don't feel like it. What did that look like for you?
For me, this answer is going to be maybe a little bit different than what you're looking for in this question. But what comes up for me is I was 5 years in, this is post-pandemic, 5 years into having my own business and having these contracts. And a business coach who is big in the DEI community reached out and asked me to come on board with her team. And this was been solicited by recruiters during the time, but I had never really considered anything. But there was something different about this. I thought this was a really rare opportunity. And the role was W-2. And after discussing their needs, they were able to create a position that really appealed to me. So I was thinking, gosh, maybe I've got one more W-2 role in me. Maybe, I'll put in a couple more years and let me see where this goes. And it wasn't so much that I was doubting where I was. It's just that appeal for a W-2, learning some different things, being a part of another organization. Yeah, as you well know, being a solopreneur can be very isolating. And I had been spent a lot of time. I'm like, maybe it's time. So I wound back some of the pieces that I had been working on and went to this opportunity. And I will tell you, Jolene, that first week back to those hours in a chair, I felt tethered to my desk. It was the weirdest feeling. I didn't expect it. I mean, I knew I was going to have to get used to having to be somewhere for that length of time, but I felt like I wasn't able to get up and I had to be on and available on Slack every minute. And it wasn't a good feeling. But people say that having a W-2, they like the stability of a consistent paycheck. And my thought about that is it's never as stable as you think it is. And if business needs change, they can lay you off in a heartbeat, and they will. And so it's not that I'm advocating 1099 for everyone, but I am saying that having a coaching certification, having a marketable skill in your back pocket, you're the one who's stable who gets laid off, because you have something that you can market and people will pay you for in a way that maybe if you just stick it out for the man, as they say, you wouldn't necessarily be in that position.
It's funny you should say that about kind of feeling tethered and such, because there's a gentleman, Omer Jelani. He is the VP of sales at Digital Avenues, and I follow him on LinkedIn. And he had a post last week that really just stood out to me. And he talked about working remotely over the past 8 years and never going back to the office and being free of all of these different things, like a 90-minute commute each day, that he's able to work out and meditate and eat a healthy breakfast, and just all of these amazing benefits. His office being his own space. And it's so cool when we think about the freedoms that we can avail to ourselves. So many corporations are now learning, hey, we can help our employees have this balance in their life by offering these remote opportunities. And just because you're remote doesn't mean you're free. And you learned that in this instance, that you can still be tethered even if you're remote. For many who think, oh, if I could just work 100% remote, that would be the thing, right? So when I talk about being brave, taking that jump and moving on over to, I want to do something else. There's got to be more to it than this. For many, that does look like, and when I'm talking to people as they're transitioning their careers, if I could just work from home, it would be so great. And then they soon learn that they can end up working longer hours, guilty as charged here. And so we think we know, but we really don't know what we don't know. And so for those who are looking at saying, you know what, I'm done with making money for someone else. I've always had this dream. I've wanted to do this thing. So like you, Heidi, they take a step, and sometimes that step is not this linear path. We've got steps all over. And so you had kind of this little sideways step where you stepped right back into W-2 because, hey, health insurance is a real thing. But often these health insurance plans with some of these places we go to work as a W-2 employee ain't so great. So the payoff, all of a sudden, we're looking at it saying, it's not that great. Just like some might go into work at home and say, it's not all what it cracked up to be. This gentleman, Omer, is talking about two other CEOs. Hey, look at all of the benefits, the tangible productivity benefits that you can get by allowing this. And I think that we can all allow this for ourselves by truly understanding what we want. And so at the heart of your decision, Heidi, was I'm getting up at 5:30. I'm working till 5:30. My kid is in daycare all day. I only have so much in me to go around, and there's got to be more to it than this. And so you used your skills in the workplace and piloted what you're really good at, what you're passionate about. And so you stepped out in faith and had some success in that. And an opportunity arose and she said, hey, why not? How many of us have done that where then we beat ourselves up saying, oh, why did I take that contract? Why did I take that W-2 job? Why did I take a step backwards? Well, because it's all learning. And while you, Heidi, were in your original corporate role, you learned certain things. When you walked back into a W-2 world after being in your 1099 world, you learned more things. And so we then start putting that together. And I think we start to really understand what's making us tick, the desires, our purpose, our passion, what I really want, what I will not tolerate. And having those core values really nailed out, I think helps us get very clear so that we can crush any of these limiting beliefs when the doubt comes in, so that we can keep pushing forward, so that we can come up with practical strategies. If anyone wants to go into self-employment, start their own side hustle, start their own podcast, whatever it happens to be, we really have to be very clear on who we are, what we want, and what we will not tolerate to be able to make traction and move forward. So did any of this resonate with you, Heidi? Because I'd like to get into some practical tips for our listeners and some steps that they can think about. And but did any of that resonate with you?
Did, Jolene. Most of what you say usually does resonate with me. Just a quick side note on that health insurance piece, because as we talk about barriers, that's one of the ones I hear most often from people who are considering making a change into a contract role away from W-2 or working for themselves is, what about health insurance? And that was one of the things I learned, did a ton of research, that there are options out there. And you bring up a great point that especially now, because the cost of health insurance for employers is so high, they are passing that on and through to their employees. So the plans that compared to 10 years ago, they're nowhere near for most organizations what they were. And for us, it actually ends up being less expensive to go about health insurance in a different way outside of an organization than it did when I was a W-2 employee.
I think it's just another limiting belief. As I mean, there's the reality that we have to have healthcare coverage, and so for the listeners who aren't in the U.S. who have government-sponsored health insurance, like we do not, bravo to you. It's awesome. This is something that you don't even have to worry about. But in the US, we do. And this is one of those things that can cause people to say, you know what, I'm not getting enough traction. And it would probably be better if I went into stability. And so in stability, they're thinking their 9-to-5 paycheck, health insurance, or whatever fringe benefits that the organization that they decide to work for kicks out. But it really is a limiting belief if we think this is the only way that I can get health insurance. This is the only way that I can have a regular paycheck. I can tell you that I've been self-employed for many years. Yes, like Heidi, I have gone in and out for various reasons of W-2 work. And one of the last reasons why was because the financial viability piece, the numbers seemed to make sense until they didn't. So for whatever reason, we might slip back into something just because you decide to cut the cord. You don't have to burn the bridge, but you can cut that cord and just let go and do that thing that you want. You can. I highly recommend doing what Heidi says and having these pilot projects, building the skills, having a side hustle, having something going on so that you can know if you can put that out into the world, into the business world, into the market, and somebody will want your product, services, whatever that happens to be. And so you can kind of test it, right? That pilot testing. And you can pilot test in the real world, not just in your workplace. In the workplace, you can practice those skills. And that's what I recommend to any of my coaches who are coming into the school. This is how I tell them to get started. I'm like, don't quit your 9-to-5. Many others will say, oh, quit your 9-to-5. You're going to earn 6 figures within 5 weeks. And this is how you do it. I don't believe in it. I have a very successful coaching company. I have a very successful training company. And it is hooey what they're telling you. So for any of you considering going into coaching, the way that Heidi has transitioned is a really great path. For any of you considering just pursuing that thing you've always wanted to do, this pilot project, that concept is huge. So you don't have to look at this as all or nothing, that I have to drop everything else in my life to be able to start up a podcast. My son-in-law is starting a podcast, and so he has his studio in his house, and he works incredibly long hours, but he's ready to go. So this is one of the things that any of us can do, is to be able to pilot what we want. And so with this concept, then we can then come up with some practical steps to take us from where we are to where we want to go without having that daunting financial insecurity, the allowing in the fear and the limiting beliefs to stop us in our tracks before we get started. So Heidi, what you've been talking a lot lately on social media about managing time and resources effectively. So, we've got some practical tips for the listeners today on how to kind of take that leap, how to get to that next place. And so we shared your story in your realm. Others may not, might not want to go into consulting. They might not want to go into coaching, but there's something, maybe it's write a book, right? So what is something that you did to help manage your time and resources effectively? Number one, so you didn't get caught up in the preparation, which turned into procrastination. And number two, that really just kind of set the fire under you to be able to do that thing. What what made you comfortable in that? Let's talk a little bit about managing time and resources here.
Okay, so this one, the topic's always been so interesting to me, partially because it's so interesting to my clients. And uh, for time management, I wanted to make that distinction between we're not really after time management. We're not really after being more productive. What we're really after is time mastery. And that concept to me is aligned with fulfillment. I don't want to work all the time. And so if I can optimize what I'm doing, not necessarily do more of it, but do what I do better, then that is an expansive approach that can add to my life. And one of the principles that I adopted early in my entrepreneur journey was two things. The first was the Pomodoro technique, which I
Yep.
think most people are familiar with, where you do a burst of work with a timer, which was very helpful to me to keep me on track, and then you take a little break.
Yep.
And by aligning my work, I use software to do that. I find that has been very beneficial. But this second piece has been even more so, Jolene, and that is the it's called Parkinson's law.
Okay.
And Parkinson's law dictates that work expands to the time allotted. So a good way to describe this is like say you're going on vacation, you're taking one of your annual trips to Brazil,
Yeah.
and you usually do that in the fall. And so you end up getting a ton of stuff done before you get on that plane.
Mhm.
Well, that's Parkinson's law at work, whether you knew it or not, right? You are trying to get all this stuff done. You have a limited amount of time to do it in. You have to get it done. And so you do. And so I have found that using time blocking and being very clear and conservative on the amount of time I'm dedicating to what I need to do has been very, very useful in keeping me on track. And you mentioned something earlier, and this kind of it reminded me of this concept too early in my journey about making that leap. And I think people can also get stuck in what's called passive action.
Yeah.
So you can sit there with a pilot project and do research after research. You can read, you can buy
Yep.
courses, right, that aren't certified. And so you're not really exiting with a marketable skill, unlike at the school. So you can really get tangled up in that. And I fell prey to that. And I think it's very common because you feel like you're doing things, but it's really lulling you into a sense of complacency that isn't outcome based. And so
Yeah.
because of that, you have nothing to show for it except maybe a
Yeah.
little knowledge. It's execution. That's where the gold is.
Yeah, I like that. And thank you for the shameless plug for Body Soul Adventures. I wish I weren't well, no, I don't wish I weren't working in Brazil. So when I leave for Brazil, everyone, I work on the island. This year will be for 2 weeks, and each are week-long retreats. So you can go to bodysouladventures.com to learn more. But I'm an adventure guide and a coach as a part of the program. And this is to really elevate your body and mind, really pushing yourself to the limits. So I leave my world here with all of the work that I do. I get ready for that, like Heidi said, getting all of this stuff done, making sure all the marketing is in, everything is ready to go, so that while I'm gone, my office can run all by itself. Now, when I get to the island, I have a totally different work, and my work is completely unattached to any electronics. It's wonderful, and really just connected with people. And so anytime we are looking at that time mastery, I love this concept of Parkinson's law, where, that work, I can tell you that people accuse me of having a time machine, because I can tend to just work and work and work. I get so caught up in it, and that work will just expand to that time that I have dedicated to that. And I, get that and more done. And because I make time. And it's this time mastery that is so important. If you are thinking of doing anything, friend of mine has been dedicating her time to her next phase of her life. And she's listening today, I'm sure. And so I'm not going to go into great detail. I'm going to talk about that in a future episode. But she is looking at building her brand today to be able to carry on to the next phase of her life. And so what she does today in her time is she has her own business. And so she's working on her business, of course, but then she has a separate piece where she's focusing on building out what that future looks like. So I'd like to get into some strategies with y'all for what you can do if you are, say, making that leap to from a 9 to 5 to your own venture. If you are wanting to take something on that you've been wanting to do, you just want to make that leap. So I'd like to get into some strategies. And so the first one is, again, back to your core values. We need to niche down anytime we're going to do anything, whether we're going into business or whether we're starting a podcast or whether we're selling jewelry, whatever it happens to be that our next, if I'm writing a book, when I talk to authors, this is an area where, what do you want to get across, right? Who are you talking to? We need to really niche down so that our message can be very clear to ourselves just as much as to others. And so we have to be able to identify our niche. What's important to us? What will we not tolerate? That was Heidi's first step. We have to create some sort of detailed plan. And I don't want to get into this analysis paralysis mode and where I am just getting into every detail of, I have to know this, I have to have this certification, I have to do this before I can even take a step. At the coach school, what we do is we walk people through, all of our coaches walk through how to build their business through the entire program. So they're not only learning their coaching skills, but they're also learning how to set up their business from a legal standpoint, how to put pricing together. What do their programs look like? Who is their ideal customer, right? We're looking at all of these different things. So we have to come up with a plan without getting into a preparation procrastination mode. And then I also need a support network. Heidi's a part of my support network. I have just this amazing host of people in my support network. And we have to have those people around us. We definitely have to have a cheerleader, right? We have to have that person saying, go, 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 you can do this. But we also have to have a sounding board and an advisor. And we need our sandpaper, that person who is going to smooth out all of the rough edges of what we're thinking and question and poke holes in what we're talking about. We don't necessarily need that person to be, this person just blasting holes to where we feel defeated, but we definitely need all sorts of people around us. So we need a very diverse support network and mentor, as well as a coach, I always say. And then we have to be willing to learn and adapt through this process. Like you've heard with Heidi, we want to make sure that we're flexible, right? That resilience was key to her. Because at one point she said, you know what, this W-2 gig seems to make sense. And getting into it, she's like, maybe not. And it's okay. So we have to have grace for ourselves. So that comes as a part of the mindset shift that we can look at this. And when I'm going from an employee to an entrepreneur, for example, I definitely have to have a different mindset shift. Again, I keep talking about the coaching school, but we really go through this because these are people's lives who are going through a transformation. They might do coaching like I did for many years while they're working for another organization. And so they might do that on the side. And so with them, they have to have this mindset shift of they're an entrepreneur. They have to take this seriously. They're the person who's in charge of their paycheck. And so that mindset is huge as a strategy. I need to keep different ways of staying mindful and connected to myself and my values, just top of the pyramid. And then I also want to balance risks with caution. So this is why I advise people, do not quit your 9-to-5 job. Do not just throw it all away, and definitely do not burn bridges. We need to balance our risk and use caution as we make these steps into unknown territories. But I don't want to be overly cautious and lose out on opportunities because I don't know something. So as Heidi was talking about this preparation phase and learning and such, I never want to use that to the point that it has crippled me. But these are just some strategies. Heidi, can you think of any other strategies that either you employed or you would advise your clients as they're thinking of taking a leap into any area, whether it is taking the leap like we've been talking about from a W-2 to a 1099, or just in taking that next step towards achieving their dreams?
Right. So, my advice to others is that you only need to be a step ahead of who your target is. I think a lot of times people put a lot of pressure on themselves to be seen as an expert. But especially in coaching, depending on the type of coaching, advisement is not necessarily your role unless you're looking to be a consultant or in a business coaching capacity. But other types of coaching, you really only need to be one step ahead, which takes some pressure off in terms of being able to turn around and actually do the thing that you're trying to do. You brought up I forgot how you termed it, Jolene. I always call it your personal board of directors. Those people you get advice from. I
Yeah.
love that term, sandpaper. I haven't heard that one. I think the other piece of advice that I have about that is that those people who want to see you do well, and one of the mistakes I made was waiting too long to engage them. They want to refer you. They want to root you on. And if they don't, you need a new board of directors. And I still enjoy referrals from the early days from friends of friends who utilized my services when I was first starting out. So
Yeah.
having that be a next step after your pilot project or after a couple of pilot projects is really taking your work out into your own personal world is something that I recommend as well.
I love it. Awesome. I'm so blessed that you were willing to share your story because I think that this will speak to so many people. I get so many emails on this topic about how do I know how to take that step? And so they're kind of stuck in this limiting belief stage where, I don't know yet. I should have this clear sign. So I think that this is going to resonate with many people. We're going to say, okay, that makes sense. And this whole piloting project, right? That pilot project thing is something that I think is going to be really paramount to them looking at the work that they're doing, whatever skill that they're building, and say, okay, this is preparing me for that next thing, for that next step, to be one step ahead. And so I think that this is going to be very helpful. So I encourage any of you listening today to send me a note, Dr. Jolene at drjolenechurch.com, and let me know what you have gained from this conversation, what bold new thing, what new step you're going to take, and what you're going to do now that you're brave. So, Heidi, I want to thank you so very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jolene. This is just like our regular conference calls, isn't it?
Absolutely. I love it. All right. And so to the rest of you, I'm going to end this like I always do. I want you to have an amazing week. Go out there and crush your limiting beliefs. Have a beautiful week. Namaste.